that well to meet the demand on a consistent basis. You have to look at what the demand was too in those time periods of that violation. There were months that the CAL FIRE station was regularly pulling huge amounts of water, you know, to fill water tenders or whatever. And so there was high consumption by specific users that were reported within or outside the place of use, and also obviously there were operational issues. I haven't evaluated the whole reason why we didn't produce enough water, but I can tell you that to show up at all 4 well pumps are off because of a power surge, and that was not reporting correctly. I don't know why in those years with just that one well that wasn't checked more frequently or whatever, but obviously the well was off for a period of time if we didn't produce enough to cover the demand. And if we're saying that the demand, you know, and the supply and demand were good. The reason that in the state is they may accept a plan of, hey, we're good with what we have. They may accept that. But in all reality, they're looking at us, that's why they're talking about the plus or minus 15% and all of those kind of things. They're looking so that there's relatively zero chance that there could result in a violation. You know, if we had a major leak on somebody that's outside the place of use or anything else that didn't get caught, how do we make sure that we've got enough water in the system on that month to be able to meet it? That's all we're concerned about. I'm a long way away from really being able to say that we're done with it, because I haven't looked at what makes up that data, why we failed. I don't know whether I'm going to have the operational information really to be able to answer all the questions, but if we don't have to commit, you know, if we don't have to commit any of the new groundwater developed for compliance, and the state will buy it, then so be it. I don't know. That in their evaluation, their tone is that without some commitment of the new well water, the district probably would have violated in the future. They said that the reason that the violations occurred before is because there was the one well, and then the district drilled the other wells, and they didn't see the violations continuing. But you know, until we get further along with the state, I'm not absolutely certain.
Pete, on page 34, they are using our own words against us here very directly.
Yeah.
While no water violations occurred in 2015 and no violations are expected in 2016, future violations are threatened. Resolution number 216- of May 16, 2016 states, whereas the district's current water supply is only derived from the emergency wells, which are in various stages of construction, with additional construction work required to be completed as soon as possible to allow for continuous temporary use of the new wells as the sole water supply for the district when Lake McClure once again drops below the district pumps. The use of the wells as the sole community supply is only intended to be temporary. If the wells are only used minimally and outside place of use issues are not resolved, violations are likely to occur in the future. So basically we told them we're only using Ranchito for outside place of use, and we are ourselves excluding our main water pumped water source as being reserved for not outside place of use. That's what this actually says. So we told them we're relying on one pump, and that at this point isn't even running. No wonder they're doing this.
So yeah, I mean that's where I made the correlation between their statements and what their expectation are, that we will commit some of that the new groundwater supply for compliance purposes. The state drinking water division only gives you a portion of the credit for your wells as far as their production, because they want you know, they want a 50%, or I'm sorry, 100%, they'll cut your amount in half because they want surety that what you are proposing is gonna work all the time, that it's gonna give water supply reliability. I'm not saying the state board's gonna look for the same thing, but we've also got to understand that those wells are, all four of them, gonna operate in rotation. Okay, let's just say Ranchito runs constantly. The other wells are gonna operate for a month at a time, so it's gonna put water into the system no matter what. That doesn't, I'm not saying that water goes into the system, we should sell it. I'm saying that that water is going to go into the system by default by running those pumps. And that alone is gonna be good enough for a compliance plan.
Didn't the boards determine that that was our backup water supply? We weren't gonna use it except for
we also
enough,
determined
but
that-
enough just every now and then to
Right.
Cycle
keep it flushed down,
that's what we
Right.
cycle it.
said.
I didn't think we were going to depend on that on
I
a
didn't
normal
think so
basis.
either.
I thought that
Right.
we were actually just gonna reserve that water as an emergency water supply.
Right, and just exercise them to keep the
That's
seals and
That's
everything.
what I thought the determination was made, that we said,
Thought
hey,
we
we
voted
have to
that.
function these to make sure they continue to
Right,
work.
so when we don't have water, we have
Right.
access,
So that's the first I've heard that.
not
So was
selling.
because that's been my direction to staff from the very beginning, is operate the wells, and when you go out and do the remote readings, you switch to the next well. Because in reality, the cost of the water is less, and there is, you know, I mean, it gives you a period of time to be able to look at the drawdown, to be able to look at the function of the pump, to look at the, you know, to look at the performance of it in gallons per minute, in gallons per kilowatt hour, in gallons per hour run. And if you just go out and turn it on, stand there and turn it off, and do that every so often, you just, you know, I mean, it's okay, but you're leaving that piece of equipment down for long periods of time. You know, and it's just added work to have to go out and do it when it doesn't increase our operating cost, it decreases our operating cost, we don't have to go out there as many times. So, but that was, I never had intended that they were gonna run all of them all of the time, but by rotating the wells and exercising the wells, it's not unusual. So, I mean, I got good input. I mean, I'll when I do, you know, maybe we have a formal, the operation of the wells is not normally a policy matter, but when it comes out in this compliance plan, it becomes a policy of the district.
We're talking about, I've heard some things saying if the Ranchito well fails and we're suddenly without water, that constitutes an emergency. The purpose of these wells was for an emergency. We don't plan on the Ranchito well failing.
Right.
If it fails, we have a backup plan. If we can't draw water from the lake, we have a backup plan. That was the purpose. When I came on this board and I originally started coming, that was the purpose of these wells. And I think we all are trying to keep that within that vision and not stretch, you know, get the rubber band thing going, well, we'll do this and we'll do this, and because then you lose sight of what you really did it for. But what I'm circling back to is for state water compliance, this compliance issue for the violation, I find it hard to believe that the state won't say, your Ranchito well will meet. They said it in there. They said it in there. The Ranchito well will meet the obligation. However, our concern, in a nutshell, is if that well fails. If that well fails, we have 3 other wells that can supplement that water. I don't think we have an issue as far as the compliance portion of it.
Because they're using
that part of it.
our own resolution
Right.
against us. All
They are.
we need to do is resolve that if
Clarify.
Ranchito well can, for
Yes.
some emergency situation, meet the demand,
Yes.
that it will be policy To meet the demand with another
with
well.
another well, or 2 wells, or
And
3 wells,
fire.
if that's what it takes.
So long as the caveat is you are not increasing the demand on that well by including more properties outside MIDPOU. Because then all you're doing is having to create more wells, get more property, build more wells, and when those wells fail, which they eventually will, we're gonna be stuck with a hell of a cost. And that's why it should be calculated so those outside POU users pay a fair share of that replacement. Because it's for them that we even have them.
We got them for the
So
drought.
we can mostly fix this with a
For the
resolution.
drought, we got those for the drought, because we
So,
didn't have
what-
any water in the lake.
Well,
Supposedly.
Yeah, too many, okay. So what is my, as far as the, back to the engineering evaluation,
Can we use the existing engineering evaluation that produces 70, and we know it's 35, and that meets the demand and obligation? And if for some reason that well failed on an emergency basis, we have other wells that could supply the same amount of water, if not more.
And these are their outflow rates.
And-
yeah, I mean, we need to, once all of the programming is done and we're reading reports from the SCADA, we will know if we've missed a couple of days. We'll know when they fail out right away. And then, let's say, for some reason, we missed a couple of days where the well wasn't operating, because during the summer, it got high demand. Because remember, we're not gonna be able to say, oh, whoops, the school had a leak. You know, if they're still in the reporting, whoops, they had a leak, so we want a gimme on this one. They're gonna ask us to plan for that. So we've gotta, just be careful about how we present it. I think, you know, I'll talk with Elizabeth. We've had this conversation before, and I remember hearing, she was absolutely firm that the 35 gallons a minute was where it needed to be, and that it just barely met the demand, and there wasn't any surplus. In fact, we had overcommitted. So, if that's the case, why is that? I need to resolve that.
Yeah, you need to clarify, because based on the calculations, I think somebody talked
We ran the
about,
numbers, West ran the numbers.
and I ran the numbers, it will produce 4.7 acre feet of
Yeah, I mean,
water.
that's easy math, I get it, but there's something else that we're not addressing in this discussion. That's why I'm bringing it up now. We have another 2 meetings to deal with this, and I've got good direction on that.